So these are some of our examples of a larger laurel oak, or Quercus laurifolia. It's a variety of oak that's native to Southwest Florida here. A lot of people, when they think about oak for bonsai, think about using the live oak, which is an excellent variety, but they do not grow naturally here as abundantly as this species does. These we just worked through, and they've been in the nursery for a while. We pulled them out of the nursery, made some cuts for taper, like you can see on this one where we made some trunk chops. We cut them back, and we also did a root pruning. Typical treatment for any of the larger material in the nursery like this is about every 3 years, sometimes 4 years. We'll take the material out of the nursery pot, prune the roots back, eliminate any circling roots, and give them some fresh soil, and they go back in the same pot. This ensures that when you get a tree like this from Wigert's Bonsai, you aren't going to be buying something that has a mass of circling roots that's difficult to repot on your end. These trees were all collected. I had a friend about 6 years ago that had access to a large tract of land that was getting ready to be cleared for commercial development, and we were allowed to go in and harvest as many of these as we wanted. All the other trees on the site were bulldozed. It became a large storage facility. So these guys were harvested, not field grown. However, they were put to good use for bonsai material, and they would have been destroyed otherwise. The laurel oak, what's nice about them, and you can see on these, is the new growth has a nice reddish color. A lot of people see this large leaf size and they hesitate to think about them as bonsai when they see them in the ground. But as bonsai material, the leaves reduce quite well to something that size. And we'll show you some of my specimen laurel oaks that I've been working with for a while. So great material for bonsai. You can cut them back. They will bud back from the trunk. The branches are easy to wire. They develop quite nicely into specimen bonsai. So this is, again, some of the larger ones that we have here at the nursery. Some have some unique shapes to them, like this guy has a twin trunk and has a little bit of an interesting movement up near the top of the tree. We also have some clump style, like this one here that's got multiple trunks. Again, has a kind of an interesting movement up at the top. These guys are all ready to go as bonsai and be worked. I would not repot them into bonsai this year since we did do a little bit of initial root work. However, they could be put into a bonsai pot next year. I think the prices on these that we're looking through here range from like $600 to $900 for this larger size. These are some smaller ones that we went through also that are in plastic bonsai pots, still just in nursery soil. These I think range from $300 to $500. This is interesting kind of twin trunk example here. And when we did do this work probably about a month ago, these were semi-dormant and we cut them back and they had pretty much zero foliage on them. So all this has grown in about the past month. So these are the largest laurel oak that we have now, the collected trees. These were quite difficult to dig out. Laurel oak has a very large taproot as well as large surface roots. So when you collect a tree like this, figure you're going to spend a lot of time doing so. These trees were dug up again about probably 5 or 6 years ago. When we worked through this batch this year, we again made some cuts for taper. The new leaders will be allowed to grow, thicken some more, and then subsequently we will need to come in and do a little carving here, either to promote rollover or to hollow it out and create dead wood in the design. This tree in the back has had a little bit of carving this year to take some of the center out, and then as it heals, this will begin to roll over and we'll keep the taper that we want in that area. And then we have a couple more trees down here. Some of these have some pretty nice bases on them. One or two that have a little bit of movement in the trunk. Laurel oak, typically we will repot into bonsai containers in the spring. So this is a good time of year to work with them, February to early March. And usually we will defoliate them when we repot. And all of these have been plated pretty low, so they'll be able to go right into a good sized bonsai container. All right, this is my oldest laurel oak that I've had in training the longest. Right now, this time of year, the laurel oaks are semi-deciduous. They've dropped a lot of their old leaves. The ones that they have left are kind of ratty. You see some browning on the tips of the leaves. So typically what I'll do in spring when I get ready to work the trees is I'll defoliate, take the remainder of the leaves off as the new leaves begin to push out. And it's not beginning to push new growth yet, but the buds are swelling. So at the time where you start seeing the new growth come out, that's an excellent time to go in, remove the old leaves. Usually we'll cut and leave a small amount at the base of the stem, remove what's left, and that'll allow you to go in, see the ramification, do some thinning, a little wiring if need be. Also, you could repot it at that time, and then it'll leaf out quite quickly after that. But this was a large tree that was collected. Again, these came from an area that was going to be developed and had access to it, so we were able to go in, get a lot of these older trees and do some bonsai with them. You can see, if you look in from the underside, the original trunk chop has kind of rotted out and hollowed out in the design, coming down and out through this root. So I've begun to start to treat the dead wood that's left in the middle with some wood hardener to preserve it. The branches that we started with are quite thick now. Those would have started as just little new shoots. They've developed quite nicely. There are some photos of this tree online in both our Instagram and Facebook pages if you search back far enough, where you can see it in full leaf, where the leaves are nice and green. And it's a very thick canopy. This is styled as kind of what some would say a Japanese pine style aesthetic, where the branches have been brought downward, and the tree is very compact in relation to the size of the trunk. The height is quite short, so we have that emphasis on a very massive tree in a bonsai pot. Again, one of my favorite varieties to work with is bonsai. Typically the leaves will stay about this size on the bonsai in summer, so you do get very nice leaf reduction. In the spring, the new growth that comes out will be larger, and what we'll typically do is about a month after it pushes that first round of growth, we go through, remove the largest leaves, then it'll push a second time. That second set of leaves stays a little bit smaller, and from there we just remove large leaves as needed throughout the year. So another couple weeks we'll go through, we'll leaf prune this, do a little bit of a cleanup, then it will be allowed to continue to kind of flush out and grow through the rest of the year. You can see in here the new leader that we grew, also thickened up very nicely, has a little bit of movement to it. Lots of branching that we've developed over the years through wiring. Great species for bonsai. And if we walk a little bit further down the aisle here, you can see a lot of tropical bonsai, some bougainvillea in bloom. This is another laurel oak, another large tree that I've been working on. This one had a lot more dead wood on it when it was collected. We are using wood preservative on these areas. The product that I used last was called Tight Bond. It's actually a wood glue. I'm going to switch over and try a different product this coming year that some of my students have been using that isn't perhaps as shiny as the Tight Bond wood glue, but that the Tight Bond kind of seals the outer layer and actually puts a layer of glue over that wood so water cannot penetrate. It's not actually absorbed like some of the other wood preservatives are into the tissue. But this tree has had some carving, some hollowing out of soft areas. It's kind of an interesting shape when you see it defoliated. This is my other large Laurel Oak bonsai. Again, it's semi-dormant right now, so it's got kind of what I'd say is a ratty look to it. That's how the trees in the landscape are also this time of year. Okay, so this is another laurel oak from my collection. This one I repotted this spring, and I've already done the defoliation, some of the branch selection, as well as wiring. And this tree I've decided to style in more of an oak tree styling as opposed to a more of a Japanese style with it. And we have some limbs that are going upward, creating the crown, some interesting lower branches. The whole front of the tree is dead wood that was naturally died back and hollowed out when we collected it. And it's going to start opening new buds here shortly. As I said, I defoliated it when I did the work, and it's now in our shade house to recover. Since we're here, I'll show you a few other trees that we're working with. I have over here a Chinese elm that got its first cut back and potting. No branches really, the top was removed. Now we're gonna wait for new branches to shoot out and make our choices and begin styling it. Likewise, this was a first planting and cut back on this mulberry tree. So once it pushes out more growth, we'll do some wiring on it, develop the design. We have a Chinese hat plant, or Holmescoidia, an interesting species, gets little red cup-like flowers. This has been in my collection for a little while. It's beginning to get a shape. Kind of an interesting tree. We have a very large Crape Myrtle that got its first cut back, few branches wired, and was repotted this spring. That's another tree from my collection. Interesting Bunjin bald cypress that I have to give friend Seth Nelson some credit for developing that initial shape. Repotted it this year, and I'm going to continue developing it from here. Then if we flip over here, I've got a nice Sumo Crape Myrtle that I've been working on for several years. Again, it was defoliated, wired, potted. Now it's beginning to push new growth. When it gets a little more growth pushed out, we'll move it out into the sun again. And then we have a pyracantha back there that I've been working with for several years from nursery stock. And then a little bit further down the path here, we have a collected Cedar Elm that was collected in Texas. Semi-cascade design, real unique trunk, has a hollow in it. I've been working with that tree, I think, about 6 years. It's coming along nice. It was repotted this year and had the shaping work done. Typically what I'm doing when I assess them and do the wiring is I'm thinning, removing unnecessary branching, wiring what needs it. If you look at this tree, you can see not all the branches are wired, only the branches that I needed to adjust the position. The goal is with time, you're only wiring some of the secondary and tertiary branches as things go on and you develop the structure. You aren't necessarily wiring everything every year. And then if we look at the other side of the aisle, we have a very large Chinese elm. That's actually the back of the tree, the way it's sitting. Again, I worked through that one this spring, and it is coming along nicely. As soon as some more leaves open up, we'll be moving it out into the sun. But if you look close, you've got a lot of little buds that are starting to swell, and it's probably, I would say, another week and a half I'll have it out in the collection area in the sun. Okay, so these are some mid-sized laurel oaks that were collected trees. Again, all of these came from a probably about a 20-acre tract of land that was going to be developed, and they were dug all about, I think, 5 or 6 years ago from that property. These are price range, you know, I think the mid-size ones like this are around $200 to $300. We have them on the website. We also have some of the more unique or nicer trees listed as one-of-a-kind pre-bonsai that you will get that exact tree if you purchase on the website. Otherwise, we select the nicest in the price range that's available at that time. Right now, again, they look real ratty. A lot of the foliage has dropped. They are semi-deciduous, and in spring they'll begin pushing new growth. I think there's a few of them in here that are starting already. With these collected trees, sometimes you'll get a unique one like this guy here. This is on the site as a one-of-a-kind bonsai. It had been kind of knocked over when it was growing wild and broke the base, but now you have a live portion with a root. Kind of has an interesting slanting design to it. Then we step up to a little bit larger size. Here's one that's already pushing the spring new growth. I mentioned earlier with our bonsai, when they begin to do this in the spring, I'll allow them to push out, and then we come in and we cut off all the larger leaves on this new growth, and we'll cut the shoots back to length. So if you have long stuff, we'll trim them back to the silhouette we want to maintain, and then remove the larger leaves, which triggers a second round of growth. Those leaves tend to be smaller, and then we can come in from that point throughout the year and maintain and remove larger leaves as need be. Typically we'll be keeping the leaves somewhere around this size on the bonsai. If you have a show hen or a smaller tree, obviously you can go for smaller leaf size. Something like that is doable, but the leaves do reduce very nicely. From that size we jump up to kind of a mid-size. These run anywhere from 300 to I think 400 in this size. They're in plastic oval bonsai pots, but they're still in regular nursery soil. And these are a nice mid-size bonsai. A lot of these are a little bit tall still. These will be due next year to go through and do some cutbacks, kind of like some of the larger trees we'll show you a little bit later in this video that had that work done this year, where we'll come in, remove some of the unnecessary height, cut back some of the original trunk chop, kind of cut it at an angle like you see this one was already cut, so it can begin to roll over and heal, and do some work like that. We typically come in on collected trees, do that every 3 to 5 years depending on the material and the size. We also at that time will prune the roots back some, so that when you purchase these you don't get something with a lot of old 5 and 8 year old circling roots. And we also carry, I pulled a couple here, we have a few smaller ones that were collected stock as well. Things this size typically start at like 35 and go up to around 50 for smaller trees. So if the bigger trees aren't for you, we do have smaller material available. If you don't see something like that on our website, you can always inquire as to what we might have available at the time. And I'd encourage you to definitely work with Laurel Oak as bonsai. They're very rewarding, develop very quickly, make beautiful bonsai, and wanted to take some time to show you some of these today. This is a large laurel oak that's growing in the ground on the border of our nursery. We have to kind of prune it every year to keep it from growing in and shading the nursery stock, but just wanted to show you again how in nature here they are semi-deciduous. You can see that it's thinned out quite a bit, just like our bonsai material. And then in another month or so, that'll be a good flush of new growth, and it'll be full of a nice coppery red color. And then from there, the leaves turn green, and it'll be green until next fall.